Welcome to part 3 of Let's Play Metroid. Today we're going through Ridley's Lair, or Norfair Depths if you prefer. And it's a bit anticlimactic that we're taking down Samus, her rival, Ridley, the one who killed her parents and her foster parents, as the first boss. I mean, he wouldn't be the final boss regardless of what I did, but in terms of the series in general, he does bear a lot more significance than Mother Brain does. And especially more than Kraid. Nobody cares about Kraid. Also, you saw a moment ago, there's a room above us, but I don't go there yet because I'm not at full health. I don't think I would survive getting that missile tank and the way back, so I go back for it later. And speaking of going back, don't do what I'm doing right now. I'm about to go to the end of this hallway, and then remember there's a big wall there that I can't get past unless I go back to the beginning of the hallway right here and go under the floor. And once again, there's nothing telling you those bricks are breakable, there's nothing telling you you're supposed to go under the floor here, so just to hammer it in some more, play this game with a map. Don't try to tell me otherwise this game doesn't need a map, because it does, and that's why the sequels had one. Anyway, let's talk about Ridley's Lair. This place is pretty small compared to Norfair and Brinstar. It's fairly straightforward, there are still a lot of ways you can go, but as long as you get to Ridley it's fine. But it is hard. There put a lot of enemies here that do a lot of damage, so it's kind of the opposite of Kraid's Lair in that regard. Kraid's Lair is very big, but the enemies aren't that threatening. So that's a matter of preference. In Ridley's Lair it's harder to survive, but in Kraid's Lair you have to survive a lot longer. I could make another Zelda 1 comparison with that, seeing how Dungeon 6 is a lot shorter but harder than Dungeon 7 in that game. But instead it's time for trivia! And most of the trivia is related to the Alien movies, because the Metroid series does take a lot of things from the Alien franchise, because, well, especially in the first 4 games, they have similar plots to the first 4 Alien movies, but I don't want to spoil too much about either of those. But there's also other stuff, like Metroid having a female protagonist also came from the Alien movies, except that wasn't decided until the very end of the development of Metroid 1. They didn't really think of any sort of gender until the very end of the development, and they were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we kept her gender a mystery and at the end it turned out to be a woman? And speaking of the endings, there's one ending in this game that's only obtainable through cheat codes, and it's actually considered the best ending of this game, and it puts Samus in her underwear, which is also taken from the Alien movies. Another thing taken from the Alien movies is that the Metroids have a mother of some sort, but I may not be referring to Mother Brain here. And last but not least, the name of Ridley comes from director of the Alien movies, Ridley Scott. So that's all the trivia I have relating back to the Alien franchise, but I do have an energy tank, yay! You noticed me celebrating here, so let's get that E-tank! I've been trolled. And I go into the morph ball for a little bit to signify me being in a fetus position. And speaking of the morph ball, because I do have more trivia, the only reason the morph ball exists is because they were too lazy to make crawling sprites for Samus. And speaking of sprites, earlier in development actually had 2 different sprites for when she's looking and walking left and when she's looking and walking right. I don't know why it was taken out, but the reason it had 2 sprites is because she has an arm cannon and the arm cannon is only located on one of her arms, unlike Mega Man who just switches back and forward for no reason. So she had different sprites to signify that, but it's not in the final product. Maybe it's still somewhere in the coning, but not that I know of. Before I go on with more trivia, there's something else I wanted to talk about. There are 2 certain tricks you can do with the morph ball, and one of them I'm about to do right here to get to the other side to get to a missile tank. I tried to get to the other side by normal jumping, but I couldn't, so I just used the morph ball trick. What we're gonna do is we're gonna roll into morph ball mode, go off the ledge, then go out of morph ball mode in midair, and then we get a second jump, as you just saw right there. Well, it's not really a second jump, it's more of a midair jump. I think how it works is that when you go out of morph ball mode, Samus goes into her standing sprite instead of her falling from the air sprite, even though you are in the air. So because it doesn't register you being in the air because it doesn't do that sprite, it allows you to jump even if you're in the air. Because if you just normally walk off a cliff, Samus automatically goes into her falling sprite, so then the game doesn't allow you to jump. So that's one jumping trick you can do with the morph ball. The other one is by going into morph ball mode and dropping some bombs and then going out of morph ball mode. The bombs will actually launch you a little bit into the air, also not activating your falling from the sky sprite, so then you can also jump in midair from a slightly higher distance than you would normally. It's a very pointless trick, but it is important to remember that, because back in Norfair there were these sections with these really high pillars, and Some of those pillars are too high that if you fall between them, using that last trick I just mentioned is the only way you can get out of them, even if you have the high jump boots. And it actually has happened to me that I fell in between those pillars and I couldn't get out, because at that point I didn't know about that trick yet, so I was stuck and pretty much had to wait for other enemies to very slowly kill me. So that was a pain. Oh, and there's one more thing I should bring up about the first morph ball jumping trick I mentioned. It only works when you're not holding left or right on the D-pad, because then you go into spin jump mode without actually gaining height. So try to hold either up or just hold nothing at all. I mean, you have to press up anyway to go out of morph ball mode. I don't think you actually go back into morph ball mode if you then press down again, but I'm not sure, I haven't really tried. So now you know those tricks and try to remember them, because I don't think there's any other way to get to the other side of that one place where the missile tank is. I mean, I know other people have tried and failed getting to the other side by normal jumping, so I'm not sure if it's possible, but maybe someone has done it and I just suck, or it just takes very precise timing. We just passed the room we just fell down from when we got to that one troll E-tank, so now we're gonna try to get to that E-tank from the other side. Though I think you might also be able to use that one morph ball trick I mentioned to get to that E-tank without having to go the way around. Or maybe just by normal jumping, but I wanted to show off this game's little humor moment. Actually, that same room appears in Super Metroid, and when I got to that the first time I recognized it from this game, and then I went like, oh, I remember this. And in Super Metroid you can get to it pretty easily if you have mastered the art of wall jumping. But now we just go up from here and then we can add a fourth E-tank to our collection. Our collection of survival tools. Anyway, let's finish off those last pieces of trivia I had. Samus, her last name is Aaron, which comes from a soccer player named Aran, who is nicknamed Pele. Pele the beloved dog. I can't believe I just made a Sonic 06 reference. I feel ashamed. But more trivia. The box art of this game says is an alternating multiplayer game, which is nowhere to be seen. It's single player only, and I don't know why it says that. Maybe it was the original plan for this game, but I had never heard such a thing, so I'm just gonna assume some idiot put it on the box or just to market the game by lying. And speaking of original plans, the original name for this game was Space Hunter, because you're in space and Samus is a bounty hunter who never actually does any bounties. And my final piece of trivia is that the original manual for this game actually calls Samus a he. It's either because they wanted to keep the mystery, or maybe it was just someone who didn't know what the fuck he was doing, because that tended to happen a lot with games in the 80s. So that caused the end of another episode of Crimson's Random Trivia segment. I love random trivia. It's 1/3 of the reason I do Let's Plays in the first place. Oh look! Another copy and paste room with the exact same enemies. That's not confusing at all. I'm gonna keep bringing it up. I wanna really hammer it in there. We're almost at that E-tank. And of course when I do get an E-tank, it's when I don't really need the health refill that comes with it. Oh, that's also something worth mentioning. You never get any major items in both Kraid's Lair and Ridley's Lair. The only things you'll find here are missile tanks and E-tanks. Not that I'm complaining about that, mind you. You can never go wrong with energy tanks. Well, the first 6 energy tanks. The 2 after that are convenient if they happen to be near you and if you happen to be at low health, but if not, don't bother. And missile tanks are nice to have a lot of, but at some point you just reach a number of missiles that you're never gonna use, so don't go after them if it's too much of a risk, like I did at the beginning of this video. Actually, that one missile tank I ignored earlier, I tried to get on previous recording sessions and then died a whole lot, and then I thought I'll save it for later. And as you're gonna see at the end of this part, I'm actually gonna forget about it, leave Ridley's Lair and immediately re-enter Ridley's Lair to get that missile tank. I mean, it's right at the entrance anyway, so I thought I could ignore it for now and then just go back for it later, because it's on the way. Hate this part. This is just a really long hallway with a lot of enemies that do a lot of damage, and I don't like it. I died a few times here as well, and there's just one missile tank at the end. After that we're gonna go after Ridley. Also, this place hurts my eyes with its fabulousness. The lava's pink, the walls are purple, most of the enemies are pink and purple. Actually, Ridley himself is pretty purple-bluish in most of his incarnations, with exception maybe the Prime games. But that may sound ridiculous, but it actually looks pretty natural on him. Oh, and speaking of ridiculous-looking Ridleys, you may have noticed in the thumbnail of this video I use artwork of Ridley that is adorable as fuck. I had to choose between using the American box art and the Japanese box art. The Japanese box art is what you're seeing, which is this very cartoony, bright and really unfitting form of Ridley. The American one would have been a lot more fitting, but it's also ugly as fuck. I mean, I can't tell where its fucking face is. Actually, that artwork does look a lot like the aliens from, well, Alien. And with that I mean the only similarities are a really long-shaped head. So I went with the Japanese one because at least that one's hilarious. And Kraid's artwork is even funnier because it's this really bright yellow and it's so unfitting, it's amazing. I mean, I could have used artwork from later games where Ridley actually looks normal, but I prefer to stick with artwork for the thumbnails that are from the exact game I'm playing instead of just that series, even if it does look kinda shitty. I'm cursing a lot during this video. It's Metroid. Of all the games I've let's played so far, this one has to be my least favorite. I mean, I like the standards that were set in this game once they were improved in the later games, but going through this game, it was a chore. Well, now I'm just sounding whiny.
I don't like playing Metroid.
Did I just make fun of myself? Oh, what just happened right there twice is when you're going through the door you are helpless and the enemies can still hit you and it's just really unfair. I mean, it will never end up killing you. Well, in most cases it won't end up killing you, but it's still annoying when it happens a lot because then it does take away a collective amount of health. So I spent a little bit of time in this hallway killing, I don't know, bouncing fruits, because I tend to have good luck with those dropping health, so they might have an increased chance of dropping health drops, but I'm not sure. And, grinding health is just so much easier in this game when you have the screw attack. In fact, everything in this game is easier when you have the screw attack. Except bosses, but bosses in this game aren't that hard compared to the rest. I mean, they're not easy either. The final boss especially can be a bitch. But the bosses themselves aren't necessarily harder than the shit it takes to get to the boss room. Especially if you know what you're doing. For example, I now have the Ice Beam, which is pretty much perfect for taking down Ridley. Just as the Wave Beam, which is the other beam upgrade in this game, is perfect for taking down Kraid. Though there are easier ways of taking down Kraid. But yeah, the way their patterns work and the effect those beams have on them, I feel like it really was supposed to be Ice Beam on Ridley, Wave Beam on Kraid. The layout of Ridley's lair is actually pretty simple. It's 3 horizontal hallways and then 2 vertical hallways on the sides to get between those 3 hallways. And there's also technically one in the middle, but that's a one-way only thing. Because, you know, gravity and stuff. Actually, there are 2 places like that. One of them is the place where we use the morph ball jumping trick. The other one is where we fell down with the troll E-tank. Troll might not be the best word because I'm using it to describe like a joke, something that makes fun of you. But troll can also be used to describe like a moblin creature of some sort. So I cleared that up. I mean, I'm gonna assume most people know what I mean, but not everyone. We are almost at Ridley, just if I wasn't such a stubborn little fuck that I wanted to kill this enemy for health and just gonna end up taking more damage than I gained in the end, so fuck. Anyway, it's Ridley time. Ridley is almost pathetically easy, because all he does is just stand there jumping, shooting a few fireballs at you, 5 to be exact, and this is why the Ice Beam is very useful during this fight. With the Ice Beam you can freeze the fireballs so that they stay on screen. He can only have 5 on screen at the same time, so if they never leave the screen he can never fire any new ones. So then he just stands there jumping until they unfreeze, and then I just freeze the new ones, so we're back to square one. Well, he's back to square one, meanwhile I'm just shooting missiles in his face. So if it wasn't for the fact that he has a lot of health, he would be easier than a normal enemy, because normal enemies at least move around a lot. He just stands still and takes missiles to the face. So I actually think that Ridley, Samus her main rival, who once again killed her parents and her foster parents, is the easiest boss in the game, because he's even easier than Kraid. And Kraid is a nobody. Kraid for Smash 4. What the fuck is with this purple door? I mean, it acts pretty much like a red door, so it's just the color, but still. Oh, and this room right here tries to trick you. These first few blocks of lava are actually real lava that if you stand in it you take damage, but after that it turns into fake lava that you can just safely stand on, but at the very end there's an E-tank, so that's worth it. Also, you may have noticed we have more missiles than before. That's because for defeating both Kraid and Ridley we get 75 missiles each. So out of those 255 missiles in the entire game, 150 of those you get for free before getting to the end of the game anyway, so that leaves 21 missile tanks to be collected, one of which is mandatory. I mean, you can't get through red doors without at least one missile tank. Oh yeah, the door, there's also something I wanted to bring up. At the end of the game, at the beginning of Torian, there's actually one yellow door. In Super Metroid, those yellow doors would become doors you would have to use the power bomb on, but in this game it's like the one door that actually needs 10 missiles instead of the usual 5. So yeah, the last 5 minutes of this video is just me heading out of Ridley's lair, and then heading back into Ridley's lair to get that one missile tank at the beginning, and then for reals heading out of Ridley's lair. And then the next video, not much is gonna be happening. We're just gonna go back through Norfair and Brinstar and collecting a few items we missed the first time on our way. Or not necessarily missed, but couldn't really get the first time. By the way, you may also notice I'm trying to land on this platform and I keep missing. That's because of the frame rate. I can't actually see myself. It's not because of the recording, this was how it was when I was playing it. But I don't think it's actually supposed to be this bad. I've never really had this problem on the virtual console as far as I can remember, so it probably has something to do with the fact that I was playing it on my computer. So why do I even bring it up? I don't fucking know. I thought you should know because it does happen a lot during this playthrough. It actually has already happened quite a number of times, so if you want an explanation for that, then there you go. So in the meantime, while we're heading out of Ridley's lair, let's talk about Metroid Zero Mission. Because I've said it before, the only reason why you might want to play Metroid 1 is if you really want the experience or just for the history value, but if you just want a good quality Metroid game, play Metroid Zero Mission. It's a remake of this game, but just so much better in every single way. Other than just the obvious graphical and music update, it also addresses pretty much every single problem I've mentioned so far. Also, I just think it's the best Metroid game to start with, at least in terms of 2D Metroid. I don't think Super Metroid is as accessible as Zero Mission. This game, you already know, I think has just aged really bad. Metroid 2, I still think is pretty playable by today's standards, with exception of graphics and music. It's pretty different from the other Metroid titles. Same goes for Metroid Fusion, though not as bad, though I think Metroid Fusion could also be a good game to start with, but I just think Metroid Zero Mission would do a little bit better in terms of that. Also, what I mean by Metroid 2 and Metroid Fusion being sort of different, they're a lot more closed off and straightforward in terms of design, and they don't really allow much freedom. And even though I know I've said it before, but I think that would have been kind of better for this game. The reason I say kinda is because, yes, like I've said before, the NES just wasn't ready for this, but at the same time, if this game didn't do it, then what other game did? The later games in the Metroid series are like this, but just good, and I love them for it, so if this game didn't do it, then those might not even have existed. So, in terms of history value, I think it's good this game exists, but there's no reason to go back for it. But in terms of it just being a good quality game on its own by today's standards, and hell, even by back then standards, quality is still the same regardless of what time period it is, you just have to realize it. Then I think it would have been better to do like Metroid 2 and Fusion did, just a lot more linear, so that's treating it as an individual game like any game should be treated, but it's also important that this game was what it was for like a history standpoint. So in the end there's no saying here, because both of those are important, and like I said, there are just better alternatives to playing this game, so why am I still talking about it? Because I'm just trying to drill it into the heads of those who still think this game is good when it has just aged so bad. And I don't have a problem at all if you just like this game, because that's fine. You can have as much fun as this game as you want. Even I can have fun with this game, but if it's good, no. And I hope to God you never get into game design, because you're gonna get told it's not good. Fun fact, in preparation of this whole rant I'm giving about this game, I actually spoke with someone who does think this game is, I don't want to say good. He did agree that he wouldn't make a game like this because of all the problems it has. But he told me I should just overlook those problems and place myself in the perspective of those who played it when this game first came out. And I halfway agree with that. I can forgive this game because of when it came out, but I don't think the problem should be overlooked because they should be learned from. But he was also just so stuck on the idea that this game being from 1986 was an excuse when I really don't think it isn't. And he's a good friend of mine, he's probably even gonna be watching this, but I just don't think it's defending this game when you're saying back in the day, when this game first came out, back then, because what about now? Do we really want to just keep our heads stuck in the past like that, or do we play games in the present, in the now, while also just moving forward? So just think about it, and think about when you're saying back then, that means you're saying with these certain circumstances that for good reason we don't live under anymore. By limiting the things you know are true and then having a good time with it, then are you really having a good time with it? When in reality, you're just playing it ignorant. But I've gone on long enough about that. Well, for now at least. So join me next time in part 4 of Let's Play Metroid when we're going back to Brinstar. See you then. I hope. I don't know. There's still a few more seconds in the video left, so I'm gonna keep talking until right about now.